A Gathering of Eagles is next week's Friday film with Rock Hudson as a U.S. Air Force colonel whose ruthless quest for efficiency leads to conflict and controversy at a strategic air command base. That's next Friday at 7 o'clock.
Tomorrow on BBC1, the start of a thriller serial, Blood Money. The story of a young aristocrat kidnapped from his school by a gang of terrorists, and the reactions of the police and the Secret Intelligence Service when a newspaper receives an anonymous letter.
I've got this ransom note.
Hold it, everybody, please.
Bernard Hepton is Chief Superintendent Meadows.
Will you read the note to me, please? Yes. Viscount Fitzcharles is now a prisoner of members of the Executive Committee of the World Revolutionary Army Council.
Juliet Hammond Hill is the mastermind of the terrorist group.
When he's not with us and during the night time, the child will be locked in here. We will keep discipline because we are fighting a disciplined enemy.
And Michael Dennison stars as Captain Percival of the SIS.
As you may be aware, Inspector, terrorism is about propaganda. The terrorists may choose the game. We make the rules.
Blood Money, tomorrow at 10:50 on BBC1.
Now it's time to join Barry Took for some more of the letters expressing your points of view.
Hello, did you have a good Easter? Splendid. Now to business. Here's R.C. Ward of Chippenham.
May I, to save time, record all my complaints in one letter?
Feel free.
I hate commentators who shout into the mic, interviewers who interrupt their victims, background music which drowns the words of a play, that soppy electronic music, those awful chanting monks who turn up in every shot of a church, canned laughter and applause, the bunch of failed school teachers who conduct programs such as Blue Peter and Tomorrow's World. Why, oh, why do they talk down?
And that said, R.C. Ward descends to threat.
Now, look, Tookie, if you don't use this letter, I will write 7 letters containing 1 complaint each.
And they would join the 600 or so that we get every week that there just isn't time to quote from. And people write to points of view about everything under the sun. For instance, here's Mrs. Y. Gray of London's Southeast 11.
Ree Wogan. Chat show hosts usually clutch clipboards as though their very lives depend on it, but not Terry, who appears to have no notes at all. Does he have a photographic memory? Notes on his shirt sleeves, perhaps? I think we should be told.
Well, it's my belief that he gets spirit messages from Gloria Hunniford. But seriously, it's no great trick to say, would you tell us about your latest film? The trick is making sense of the answer. On which subject, comprehensibility, we received this recently. It's from Dave Jowett of Bradford, who says at the end of his letter,
let's see your readers get their tongues round that.
And here's what he wants them to get their tongues round.
Need we suffer any longer to take Irish accent of John Cole? At times you can't tell a word he says. Or else let's have a real good Yorkshire bloke for a change. I'm sure it couldn't have been much worse.
Well done, Michael. Go and lie down. Next. Oh, it's David Moore of Holland-on-Sea.
Having recently watched Dynasty, Fall Guy, Falcon's Crest, Dallas and similar shows, I am left wondering what American TV scriptwriters do after the age of 7, with apologies to the brighter under-7s.
Well, what happens is they become producers and rewrite the scripts written by the under-7s. But now from the banal to the chic. And Mrs. Leslie Lewis of London's Southwest 3.
I loathe the vulgar and ignorant treatment of champagne in television programmes, notably one on breakfast time.
Mrs. Lewis describes champagne as
the best drink in the world.
Well, in Southwest 3, I thought it was the only drink in the world. Anyway, Mrs. Lewis gives precise instructions on how the bottle should be opened and the wine poured, and complains...
On the telly, the bottle is lovingly nursed to warm it up, vigorously shaken and opened in a cloud of spray which damages anything within range. The small residue of liquid must be quite undrinkable.
Mrs. Lewis goes on.
Please, BBC, set a good example instead of imitating the beastly ritual seen after sports victories.
And Mrs. Lewis concludes her letter.
Please give viewers the vicarious pleasure of drinking chilled champagne, bubbling no more than decorously in an elegant glass of appropriate shape.
Here's another cry from the heart from Watford, again with breakfast time as its cause.
Dear Mr. Took, breakfast television is becoming a major cause of obesity. Since its introduction, I've been taking much longer over breakfast and consequently eating more. Only this morning I was about to spread some marmalade on my 11th roll when I came to my senses. Yours sincerely, Digested 10 Bridge Rolls.
Good enough for Punch. Now, 3 double acts that have caused you a certain amount of agitation. Cagney and Lacey, Hinge and Brackett, and Peter and Paul. Alan Robson of Newcastle upon Tyne calls Cagney and Lacey
the best detective series in years.
And Miss K.E. Scroggie of Eltham says,
Following much criticism of some of the American programmes which the BBC has seen fit to put on our screens, I would like to take this opportunity to praise one. That programme is Cagney and Lacey.
Your praise is registered, Miss Scroggie. And when Cagney and Lacey aren't on, well, it's chaos in the Fryer household in Up Holland, Lancashire, as Mrs. Margaret Fryer reveals.
Friday night, 9 p.m, the dogs started to cry. Pools of tears on the carpet. Husband almost swallowed his pipe, hot ash holes in his jumper, and I sit in disbelief. Why?
No Cagney and Lacey. But if no genuine ladies are on view, why not try the substitutes Hinge and Brackett? Many have, and have not been disappointed. Here's Robin Van Aggs of Taunton.
The new series with Hinge and Brackett is an absolute treat.
And here's Mrs. D. Pearson of Northallerton.
Just felt that I must drop you a line to say how I really enjoyed Dear Ladies. I laughed till I cried. In fact, my husband thought I was sat on a feather.
Pam Thompson of Oxted says of the Dear Ladies,
Long live Hilda and Evadne.
And T.A. Bell of London E17 tells me that he is...
Never laughed so much.
And ends his letter.
My very special thanks, of course, to Messrs. Patrick Fife and George Logan, without whom those very funny ladies would, indeed, could not appear.
And here are Fife and Logan, more properly, I suppose, Hinge and Brackett, in a moment from their current series.
Came in with the cocoa, took one look at you, and I said, there sits Sherlock Holmes.
So what do you think?
Well, I mean, when you've got the hat on, it'll suit you beautifully.
The hat?
Well, with the flaps down, you look just like a bloodhound. That's the face we want on the posters. It'll bring the crowds in, that will, yes. Oh, dear. Well, what's this new musical of yours to be called, then?
Well, the provisional title
Yes.
is The Hound of the Baskervilles.
And you'll be playing the lead, I suppose. Oh, thank you, dear.
From Hinge and Brackett, we turn with a mighty wrench in style, manner and tone to Peter and Paul. Now, I haven't watched these programmes because I'd assumed it to be about 2/3 of an American singing act popular in my youth. But no, it was a dramatised version of the lives of St. Peter and St. Paul. Marjorie Brown of Appleby, Cumbria, says this.
Congratulations to the BBC for the marvellous 2-part programme, Peter and Paul. It was great to have the Bible, which is the Word of God, so accurately quoted.
Thus, the good word from Appleby. 17 students of theology, writing from Oak Hill College, Southgate, London, North 14, have other thoughts on the matter.
Having enjoyed your production of Masada, we had to write in to ask what went wrong with Peter and Paul.
I don't know. You tell me.
St. Paul had the belligerence of a shop steward. The disciples faced the future with all the joy and confidence of the presenters of TVAM, and we've seen miracles taken more seriously on a party political broadcast.
And the gentlemen of Oak Hill College, whose motto is be right and persist, complete their letter by saying,
to those who were similarly bored by the film, we highly recommend the book.
And if St. Paul was like a belligerent shop steward, more or less what he was, I'd have thought, what of poor St. Peter? Well, according to a gentleman who writes from Stamford in Lincolnshire, but is anxious not to have publicity, as he calls it, St. Peter had a very rough deal in the film.
Poor Peter was barely allowed to get a word in edgeways from saying goodbye to his wife and being nailed to a cross as a Christian martyr.
Presumably not what he'd bargained for at all. But on the whole, the programmes were enjoyed, and many would echo Mrs. Jenny Wood of Herm in the Channel Islands when she says,
Peter and Paul, excellent. I learnt more about these 2 characters in 3 hours of telewatching than ever I did in 13 years of school scripture lessons and over 60 years of church-going.
Well, I think we'll leave it there and turn to the more secular business of becoming a paratrooper. Timothy Lynn of Newcastle on Tyne writes of the series The Paras.
In my opinion, this programme is plainly and simply brilliant.
Ernest Heaton of Streatham feels similarly.
Having just watched the Paras on BBC1 training, I can only state what a wonderful bunch of men they are.
And how well filmed. Jack Hatcher of Needingworth, Huntingdon, makes that point in his letter.
Just a line to say thanks to the team who produced the first Paras episode. What a super programme.
Obviously, the Paras brought back memories for many, including Jack Hatcher.
As a wartime squaddie, I was amazed to see that the induction procedure has hardly changed since 1942.
But ex-company Sergeant Major Lofty, who tells me he served in the Paras, the Commandos and the SAS, so I'm grateful that in the event of another war, he'll be on our side, writes,
As a wearer of army boots for 27 years, 8 of them are the Paras, I suggest that the NCO, who instructed his section of recruits to soak their leather boots in hot water to soften them, qualifies for an immediate posting to Fred Carno's army as a qualified idiot.
But let's have a glimpse of the lads in action, moving towards presumably what they joined up to do, making a parachute jump.
The balloon jump is the first and the worst. What no one admitted was that after 2 months in a red beret, fear of refusing in front of mates was probably greater than fear of jumping.
Cross reserve.
Go!
Train to number 2.
And steer away, number 1. Steer away now. Okay, stop steering now, number 1. Let up. Okay, it's a good position now. Elbows in, round the shoulders a little bit more. Let up with your right arm now. Elbow in.
Right.
How was it?
Scared stiff till my chute opened. And it's brilliant.
What about standing on the edge of the...
Oh, I don't want to think about that ever again. Oh.
Still scared of heights?
Yeah.
Rather them than me. From today's army to that of the last war, and many of you have written to say how much you enjoyed the Fourth Arm. Mrs. Carol Stewart of Whitley Bay asks, rhetorically,
What am I going to do? Friday nights will never be the same again. Is life worth living, I asked myself. Only a second series can help me now.
There speaks an addict. Here speaks another, Mrs. Angeline Levin of Blackpool.
I've really enjoyed the series The Fourth Arm on Fridays.